2020 ended at 5 million. 2021, we hit 10 million, and we've been at 8 figures plus since then. We launched the club in May of 2020 with 300 founding members, which immediately turned it into $1 million offer because it was $295 a month. The following month in June, we had 1,000 more people join. And that's when shit started to break.
Rachel Rodgers, it is so good to see you. It has been many years at this point.
Yes, definitely. Not for like DMing or texting, but years before, since seeing you, for sure.
For sure. Well, and probably a couple from trying to make this particular thing happen.
Yes.
So I appreciate you carving out some time.
Yes, you literally have chosen a podcast topic, right? That is, you're basically, all of your guests are some of the busiest people. So most in-demand people.
That's true, because very often in the multi-million to kind of low 8 figures, I've heard lots of people talk about this over time. It's this black hole of chaos of trying to move from wearing many hats to getting to the point where you can work, quote unquote, work yourself out of the job.
Yes, exactly.
And you're right. Most people, myself included, probably do a terrible job handling that and are trying to figure out what's going on. And there's not a roadmap. And so one of my ambitions with this podcast is to help people figure out the roadmap.
Yes.
And Hello 7 is your company, which you built to 8 figures plus, have been doing for years. And I'm hoping we can dig into some of that. But before we do, I'd love for you to give me a little bit of background on how you got started in business and how you launched Hello 7.
Yeah. Well, I got started in business because there was not a lot of great job opportunities. It was the 2008 recession. I graduated from law school 2009. I, went into law school thinking I'm going to leave law school with a 6-figure, job as an associate at a law firm. That's what I was looking to do, even though that's so not my personality. When I look back at that, right, that would have been a disaster, and I would have probably gotten fired pretty quickly. And in fact, their hiring processes are good enough to basically, I had many, many interviews. I had many second interviews. I had very few job offers. I did get a few. But, and they weren't it was like, the one job offer that I got that was 6 figures, like over 100,000, was working for Big Oil, for this law firm that represented Big Oil. And I was like, that feels unaligned. But that was like,
in indirect alignment with your personality.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, but I would love that paycheck. So I did think about it for a little while, but I didn't take it. So because of that, basically out of necessity, I had other job opportunities too, but none of them had enough good elements that I was willing to take it. I was like, you know what would be better than working for too little money, doing something I don't want to do, or working for a good amount of money, doing something I don't want to do. What if I just started my own thing? And the reason why I did that too is because I was like, well, I'm already broke. I'm used to being a broke college student. Then I was a broke law student, right? So I might as well just be a broke entrepreneur now, right? Until I can build it up to what I want it to be, because I didn't want to get comfortable with a fancy paycheck and then I would never quit, or would just take a long time or be hard to do. So that's actually what brought me to entrepreneurship. And my first business was a law practice. So that's what I did. And I represented mainly a lot of entrepreneurs because, like myself, right, during the recession, a lot of people were starting their own businesses. And so I just looked in my own network and found clients through that and ran that for about 6 or 7 years. And I had a couple of associates working for me and a team. So I got an early start on learning how to build a team, managing a team, learning how to be a rainmaker, making clients, getting the clients to come in and all of that. And I discovered what I liked about business and what I didn't. So mainly from that business, I learned that I love running a business. I loved managing a team. I loved the marketing and bringing clients in and connecting with clients, the relationships. I loved all that. I hated drafting contracts. I hated all of the transactional work. I enjoyed the negotiation, but after that, somebody else do the paperwork. I don't want to do that part.
So you hated being an attorney is what you're telling me.
Basically, loved being a business owner, hated being an attorney.
Yep.
The way I wound up doing Hello 7 is that these same clients would say to me, your practice is scaling, right? You're growing your practice, you're growing your team, all of that. How are you doing that? Right? What are your marketing strategies? These things that you're doing, like teach me how you do what you do. And so I just started giving my legal clients business advice for free. And a friend of mine and mentor was like, yeah, no, I'm going to need you to charge for that. That's a chargeable thing. And I was like, oh, really? Because I was thinking like, I can only charge for the thing that I have a degree in, that I've been professionally trained to do. That was my thinking. And she's like, no, if they're asking and they want to buy it, then you sell it to them, but you charge them. Don't give it to them for free. So I just started dabbling with charging for it. And I had a side hustle, right? So I'm running a law practice with a team. And then my side hustle was, let me try business coaching. And so I had one client that I brought on. And in 6 months, her business went from, I think she had made, she had just made $100,000 and she was constantly on tour. She had a young child. And so I basically rearranged her entire business so that it made a lot more money and she could stay home with her son. And so by the end of 6 months, she was like, let's say at $500,000, something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm good at this. And then she told everybody that she was making, because she was so happy with her results. So that brought in more clients and all of that. And that's how I got into business coaching.
Couple things. One, I can't imagine that the legal community looked at you doing business coaching and thought, what a great legal professional here.
First of all, the legal community hated me from day one. Let's be clear. Mainly because I am not a rule follower. That's not who I am. And that's a lot. They expect you, especially as a young lawyer versus you have older lawyers, right? You need to respect your elders. And this is a great example of kind of what we were talking about before you hit record of what's going on right now, right? These were older attorneys who were saying, this is how you practice law. When you graduate, you don't start your own practice. You go work for a firm. You find a lawyer to sort of hitch your wagon to and be appropriately trained and mentored. And then maybe one day you get to go out on your own. And I did not follow any of that pathway. Truly out of necessity, I couldn't do that, right? Because of the recession. Even if I wanted to, and I guess there was some opportunity to do that, but I wasn't willing to, right? There was not enough good things for me to do that. So they were annoyed with me from day one. And especially because when I started my practice, I started immediately getting press, immediately within months. I figured out, remember Help a Reporter Out, Harrow? Did you ever use that? Yeah.
I didn't, but I know Peter Shankman, who was the one that started it.
Yes, exactly. And so I learned about it and I was like, oh, this is free, because I had definitely more time than money. And so I was like, okay, great. Every time there's a legal question that's within the realm of my expertise, business law, IP, employment law, those areas, I'm going to jump in and answer these questions. And so that's what I started doing. And then once you answer a few and get a couple of placements, then journalists just start coming to you because they know you're a good source. Whenever they needed a business law, and then also they did stories on me on starting a practice right out of law school, because it was a story that we had, thousands upon thousands of law school graduates and there were no jobs for them, so that was a big story in those years. And so I was always, a source for that too. So that brought me a lot of attention from other lawyers, but it also brought me, potential clients and, these sort of old establishment attorneys. Some of them, obviously, there were a lot of people who were great and who actually did mentor me. There were definitely lawyers that I could call when I would be like, okay, what do I do in this scenario? So I had sort of my board of mentors. But there were also lawyers who hated the fact that I had the audacity to start my own practice right out of law school. I mean, I clerked for a judge for a year first, but that's not enough for them. And then the fact that I just did it my way, and, was also very visible about it too. I wasn't hidden in my corner. I was getting press constantly, more than them, So they didn't like that. So yeah, they definitely wrote scathing articles that I'm sure if you search my name, you probably have to dig now, because there's been so many press mentions that's not about that. But for a while, it affected. Sometimes clients would come to me and say why are these horrible articles about you? And I'm like, these people have never talked to me a day in their life. They don't know me. They're just incensed by my mere existence, So, but that was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me, especially in the world that we live in today, right? There's so much commentary, there's so much judgment. Every little thing that you do, first of all, one thing about haters is they always have their facts wrong. You know what I mean? So they love to hate you, not on things you actually did, but things that they, I don't know, heard through the grapevine or made up. I don't know. So there's so much of that thank God for that preparation, right? Like I'm grateful for those lawyers now, all these years later, because I really don't care. You know, I'm not somebody that is really worried about what everybody is saying about me. And I think that was an education. That was a trial by fire. And I definitely did care when I had just started. But I think it built up that muscle in me where I'm like, oh, these people don't pay my bills, right? Like they don't affect anything. I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm grown.
Well, that's true. And I love that sentiment. At the same time, we live in a world now where public perception often is guided without fact.
Yes.
And so you get enough negative press, even if it's completely not rooted in truth, and, pick any one of a dozen examples in the last 5 years that has gone public around the world. How did you internalize that? So you get a whole bunch of negative press where you can, even though they don't quote unquote pay your bills, the press does, right? And people do judge based on press. Did you have concerns about sort of the branding of your firm when you had negative press come out?
I did have concerns about that. But you know what? Like I literally spent probably a week or at least a couple of days like on the couch crying and sad. And I was pregnant at the time and with my first child. And
I'm sure that made it easier to control the emotions.
Yes, totally. 100% under control, just stoic. But I think what got me off the couch was first my husband being like, you gonna let these dudes stop you? Like look how convicted and how, focused you've been. And all of a sudden one hiccup and now you're shutting down. So that was his stance. But then also, and I honestly, his phrasing was more like, you gonna let these motherfucking old white guys tell you what to do and stop you, And I'm like, you know what? When you put it that way, no. But then also I was just thinking about what would I say to my daughter if somebody was saying negative things about her? Would I say, go in your corner and cry? Or would I tell her to defend herself? And then, what helped me was I started just reading about like, how do you respond to this? And I had a friend who was a publicist and I asked her too. And I found Tim Ferriss has an article that he wrote many years ago about responding to haters. And he talked about how in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, that is what Martin Luther King Jr. is doing, is responding to his haters. And so he said, like, this is a masterclass on how to respond to negativity, or not only negativity, but just like basically adversaries, people who are against you. And so I was like, okay. So I went and read the letter and then I wrote a response using that as my guiding tool, right? Like using Letter from a Birmingham Jail as a template. And I wrote a response and I turned off comments and just shared it. And what happened is it galvanized all of these young lawyers who were like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like they felt seen and represented because it was kind of like these older lawyers saying, this is how you do it. And these younger lawyers saying that world doesn't exist anymore. So what you got to do is not a pathway that we can do. And we're not just going to roll over and die. And we're not going to go sell French fries, right? Like with $100,000 in law school debt, right? Like something else has to give and we have to find another pathway. And so basically I responded to them and that wound up bringing audience to me. So I think defending yourself is an important element, especially when people have facts wrong. And your goal is not to win everybody over. Your goal is to get it off your chest and say your piece, right? Like you're not going to be able to necessarily get everyone to agree with you. And that's not the point. The point is to say what you have to say and represent your interests and defend yourself, which I think is important as well. Not in every case. Sometimes people are just saying such nonsense that it's not even worth responding to. But there are circumstances that are. So that's how I responded to that. And it didn't stop my practice. I mean, some people saw it and still hired me. Other people never saw it. And it was what it was.
So you move into coaching and the first business coaching thing that you do, the coaching space today, I think I look at coaching, and Easy Pay Direct we have a huge foothold in the coaching space, and now it turned into this, coaching, consulting, high ticket space.
Yes.
But originally that was kind of the personal development space,
right?
And it was, Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins, and they sort of created this new space. Speaking of an industry that had a prescriptive design, that was psychologists and psychiatrists,
right?
And that was it,
right?
And then it moved into sort of personal development, which had really had a not incredibly positive through line for most of my youth. If you mentioned reading a personal development book at 15 or 20 or 25 even, you got looked at sideways by tons of people. And today that's different.
Yes.
But
I even think it was different for me and when I was young, because I think part of it was because I was going to a church. So there was a lot of Christian self-help and Christian self-development, and that was popular. So I think that had a positive spin on it, but you might be right.
Well, I mean, I think that's right. That's my internal narrative, but certainly the industry didn't exist the way that it does now in terms of business coaching and personal coaching. And I bring it up because when you first did, maybe I'll just sell this thing and somebody's willing to pay for it, let's do it. Did you have any sense of following the model that was already out there for business coaching or personal coaching?
No. Well, I feel like there wasn't much of a model. And if there was, it was hidden. Right. So there were very few people, especially women, who are even talking about having 7-figure businesses. And that's actually what caused me to start Hello 7, because I felt like all of the messaging, especially geared towards women, was like, have a 6-figure business, have your little puppy of a business, right? Like pat you on the head kind of energy. And I'm like,
and when was this?
This was
14, 15, 13.
Yeah, I started my law practice in 2010. And then I started transitioning probably 2015 to 2017 is like, because you don't just quit law. Like that's not how this works, right? You got to finish up all those cases in order to leave the law. So it was a 2-year process of wrapping up that practice and kind of doing business coaching, sort of like, winding down the law practice, winding up business coaching during those years. So, but even before that, right, I was looking for business coaching myself because I wanted to grow and I had never been an entrepreneur before. I have some entrepreneurs in my family and friend groups, but they were like not very successful, like they had started things, but I really didn't see them grow significantly, And so I was looking for my own advice. And so I was looking in the industry too. There were not a lot of people making 7 figures for sure. Or at least if they were not talking about it. And usually it was kind of like a landing page, right? Where you opted in and then you went on a journey, but they weren't showing you their whole business model on the website. So you really didn't know how it all worked. You might hear from the grapevine, like, oh, they have this course. And then once you take that course, maybe you can get into this other thing. And then there's this inner circle thing that, like you only hear about and you have to like catch it when the applications go live. And it's also like, let's say $25,000, $30,000. And back then that sounded wild to me, and to a lot of people. So those, I feel like there was no blueprint to follow truly. I honestly followed the legal blueprint, which is kind of like, okay, I started charging for consults after a while in my law practice because I would get so many potential clients that I'm like, okay, let's start sifting through these with the ones that are serious. So now we charge for an initial consult. So like I went from doing those for free to like $500 per session. So that's really how I started, was just kind of like a pick my brain kind of thing. Ask me whatever you want for $500. And then the first one-on-one client that I had, I followed the model of a life coach that I knew who did like a 6-month coaching package. So I did something similar to her and, charged peanuts to help someone make hundreds of thousands of dollars just because I just didn't know, right? I was just getting into the game and trying to figure it out. So I definitely was on the figure it out as you go plan. Not like, here's the business model we're working towards. And I would just try everything. So I did retreats. I did one-on-one. I did group sessions. I did classes. I did 6-week classes, 8-week classes. I did every version of coaching that there was for like a 2-year period, and then got really tired because it was like 1,000 things to deliver, 1,000 things to sell and market. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. And then I kind of combined it all and streamlined it into a mastermind. That's what I did. I want to say that was probably like 2017, 2018, when I started simplifying. So yeah.
So in those initial 2 years, how far did you get from a revenue perspective?
Great question. I think I hit $1 million for the first time in 2017, 2018, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
And it grew very quickly from there. It was really actually very interesting. So my law practice, plateaued for a couple of years. Somewhere it was like we went from 450 to like 650. And to me, that was plateauing because previously before that, I had done big jumps. Like I went from $60,000 my first year in business to $300,000 the second year. And so I was kind of expecting that kind of growth to continue. And that's not what happened. We kind of plateaued. And I think we plateaued because I was really not interested in practicing law. So it's like, I want to sell and get clients, but there's something in the back of my mind sabotaging it because I really don't want the work, I don't want to do that work. Even managing my attorneys to do that work was a lot of work for me, But anyway, so we had plateaued and I think we got up to, let's say 750, something like that. And I could see a clear pathway to get to $1 million, but I just wanted to pivot because I didn't want to practice law anymore. So I finally started admitting that to myself and winding down. My first year doing business coaching full time was $1 million a year. And we knew that like by March because we had made so much money. We were already on track for that. And then I think we exceeded it the first year. So it was so interesting that like as soon as I got into something that I wanted to be doing, it was on fire, and it grew very rapidly from there.
Beyond a Million is brought to you by Easy Pay Direct. If you're an entrepreneur and you are still using a product like Stripe or PayPal to accept payments, it is time to find out why the largest names in your industry would never consider doing that. Check out easypaydirect.com/BAM to find out more.
If you had to do that initial, and I want to get into the post-million phase here, but if you had to do that initial phase over of life, would you have gone to law school?
Yes. I would never, there's no scenario where this version of Rachel would not exist without law school. Because what I did in law school was hone my writing skills and my public speaking skills. And those two things are what my business is built on, and also critical thinking, strategy. That is also a crucial part of being an attorney. That's really what they were teaching me how to do at a base level. It was with law, right? Because you would get cases where you completely and utterly disagree with, one side or the other, and you have to argue it both ways. So you have to write a legal brief. And first of all, you only have a certain amount of words to do so. And you have to use the facts and case law and all of that. And you need to prove your case, like defend this person that you don't want to defend. Or maybe you do like the case and you defend them, but then you also have to argue the prosecutor side as well. So it just taught you how to think critically and strategically, even when you didn't believe in the thing, right? Like it was like the thinking that it was forcing you to do was so valuable. So that, and then also legal writing I always talk about this. One of the things with legal writing is like you'd write a brief. They give you an assignment, you write the brief. And then what they do in the grading of it is they go through line by line and cross out every word that does not need to be there. Right? Like why, you have an extra that. You don't need that. You don't need to say there here. You don't need this word. You don't need that word. And you go through line by line and have to cross every word out you don't need because you have a word count and you need every word to count and to matter, right? Because you're defending someone like for their freedom. It's important. And so they train you on how to do that. So I just have learned how to be concise, how to express complex ideas, how to tell the story that I want to tell, that I want the judge and the jury to believe, right? So it's like persuasive writing. Like there's so much value in the writing skills that you get from law school.
Yeah.
So like We Should All Be Millionaires, my best-selling book would not be what it is, right? Without those skills. So I think the writing skills were crucial. And then doing mock trials where you have to make arguments. Sometimes you have no case. Like the facts are not on your side. The law is not on your side. And so then you use a public interest argument, right? And so I was good at those. That was my go-to. And I was known for that in law school because of course that's where I'm always thinking about like social justice and moving us forward as a society. So that, all of those public speaking skills, persuasion, all of that, it's like learning that is so incredibly valuable. So that's what I really got out of law school that I'm extremely grateful for. And also just learning how to be in environments where I'm uncomfortable, where I'm being challenged and rising to the occasion. Like that's always going to help you in business because that is what being an entrepreneur is.
Yeah, I love that. There are a couple things that hit close to home there. The first is I try hard to separate meetings inside the company between scheduled actionable meetings and creative sessions.
Yes.
And the parallel here is when you talk about taking the other side of the argument, generally in actionable move forward meetings that are scheduled that have an agenda, we don't make space for that.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but let's move it forward because I don't want to fucking debate in every meeting.
You're right. Exactly.
Not the time or place.
Yes.
But I do need to hold the space for the debate. And it's important to bring up the other what if scenarios.
Yes.
And to sort of steelman arguments. So I love that. That's a very cool takeaway.
Yes.
The other, go ahead.
I was going to say, have you heard that about Amazon, their principle on ideas brought up by employees? 2 managers or 2 directors. Have you heard about this? I saw something.
I don't think so.
It was one of their leaders who works at Amazon. He was talking about this on social media recently. And he was saying that at Amazon, they have to consider every idea brought to them by an employee. So if an employee has an idea for a product, if they have an idea for like how to do something better, efficiency, process, whatever, they have to consider it. And if they don't consider it, they have to write a 2-page letter that is public. So like basically their whole team can see it, or there's a significant portion of the company can see it. And they have to argue, the director has to argue their reasons why they're not considering and why they're rejecting this idea. So it's sort of how it functions is it trains basically all of the directors to listen to their employees and to hear their ideas. And they said that that's where, what is it called? AWS came from, was an employee's idea. And so that's why they have this policy. Like they want to hear their employees' ideas, because employees see things that you don't see as the leader. They're in touch with things that you're no longer in touch with, that you used to be in touch with, but now there's some distance. There's like several layers of team members before it gets to you. So I just thought that was really interesting. And it makes me think of what you're saying, like having these creative sessions so you can hear from your team what their ideas are,
Yeah, that's interesting. I can also hear at least 50% of the people listening thinking, God, that sounds fucking terrible.
It does in some ways, but I think in a smaller company, I think we have to just find a way to make sure that team members have an outlet to share their ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, I think that there's consistently a balance between staying open-minded and also the reality that you're going to have a lot more context than a brand new employee or than an employee in a certain role.
Yes.
Right. And so it's juggling those 2 ideas in your head when you're trying to lead.
Yes, it's true. It's true. But we're not always right. And I think the sooner we get in touch with that, like the better, because I think that we can get into this, but I feel like being an entrepreneur, the whole process is basically killing your ego, just slowly but surely over a long period of time. I completely agree with that. And part of it is, and we were talking about this, I think before we kicked off, but part of it is when staff comes to me and asks me for an answer, my question 98% of the time is, you tell me. Right. Yes.
What the fuck are you asking me for?
Yes.
You tell me. What do you suggest here?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm not your problem solver. I'm not here to fix all your problems.
Yes.
I brought you here to help me fix the problem.
Exactly right. And also too, there are times where I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I need 12,000 more pieces of information before I could possibly give a decision or even potential ideas on that. Whereas you have all of that information already in your head because that's your job every day. So you come to me with at least 3 options. I'll help you pick. but I'm not coming up with the solutions.
You got it. And the other reality is that even if you do have the answer as a leader, the more you just solve the problem, the more people will continue to be habituated to come to you to solve the problem.
Exactly.
And so you really have to, even though employees hate this sometimes and it seems sort of pedantic and unnecessary, we're always conditioning some behavior.
Yes.
And, if I let my dog run out the front door once when the door opens, then he thinks it's okay.
Right.
He just fucking runs out because it's more fun. And I have to make him sit every time before we go because he needs to know that. And he needs to know that that's the pattern.
Yes.
And while nobody wants to be compared to a dog, we're all animals. So also my dog's probably a lot cooler than everybody listening. So sorry about that. Not sorry.
I think there's a bias there. But yes, honestly, one of the things that has helped me to be a better leader is being a parent and leading small people, because small people obviously, like children they're obviously they obviously don't know certain things or, so you don't expect them to know. So you're constantly training and educating and all of that. And it's kind of like that with employees, because even if they have experience, when they come to your company, they don't have experience with your culture, your values, how you do things here. And they require so much more training than people think they do. And so not assuming that they know and making sure that you have taught them or that it's somewhere in the process, in the onboarding, in the training that they're learning these things and then being held accountable to it. But so you're saying dogs, I'm saying children. So no one's going to want to work for us ever again. But we know you're adults. That's not what we mean.
I feel great about it. Well, I'll tell you, the other one that I think about is myself. I think about when I want to get myself to do something that I'm rejecting. And the answer is building a habit around it without question. The answer is getting out of the space where you have to force yourself to do something and building the habit. And the way you build the habit is make sure that in the moments when you don't think you should be doing it, you do it anyway.
Yes.
And eventually your go-to is just to execute.
Yes.
Right? It's just to do it.
Yes. It's so true. And it makes it so easy as well. There was a second thing you were going to say in response to my law school thing.
The second thing was everything you were talking about relative to honing messaging for an argument and limiting words. That is directly applicable to all marketing that people do, specifically in the world that we live in where you're limited to characters.
Yes.
So even when you weren't, but you have to think, we kind of always are. You have to think about headlines, subject lines, subheaders, the first paragraph, the first sentence, how long you can keep attention.
Yes.
And scripting a sales letter, scripting a video sales letter, all of those things, every word matters. The order of the words matter. The emphasis matters. And so that training that you're going through for entrepreneurs that don't feel like they're good at messaging or copywriting or marketing, first of all, certainly you can outsource it.
Yes.
But if you want to get better, the answer is revision, revision, revision.
Yes.
And it's read through it. It's eliminate words and take it from there. But the less words you can communicate in, usually the better grasp you have on a topic.
Exactly right. So it's very powerful tools. And, I highly recommend law school, but not necessarily to practice law.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to practice law, yes, go to law school. But I'm very grateful for the education that I got there. And even just the ability to practice law for several years. I'm glad that I did that too, because I learned a lot about myself, especially running a law practice. I would have never known that I love business and I love being an entrepreneur had I not gone out on my own. So I think we have to follow that first step or that next step, even when it makes zero sense to us, because it's often leading us to wherever we want to wind up.
Yeah. Well, I have a family of attorneys. All my cousins are attorneys, and I have lots of thoughts. But I think that without question, it's a great background for business. It also I also have a million thoughts on sort of traditional schooling, but one of the benefits for sure, specifically in a harder path like law school, is just committing to an outcome.
Yes.
And deciding, hey, I'm in it until I'm done.
Yep. Exactly right. Even when it's
and I love that about that path.
I mean, I went my first semester of law school, mind you, I graduated summa cum laude, I want to say, or whatever the next one is. I can't remember, but it's one of those, with honors for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go from graduating with honors to law school. And in the beginning, I mean, it was almost the end of the first semester. And I was like, what is all this Latin? Criminal law? I mean, that was killing me. I was so confused by mens rea and what it meant. And it was not a straightforward definition. And like all these different Latin phrases. Torts was a hot mess express for me. Like some of my first classes in law school, I was like, I'm really bad at this and I'm about to fail. Like I just graduated with honors and now I'm back at the bottom and I'm trash, and now I have to get good at this thing that is really difficult. I just think those experiences, any of those, because every time you can look back and think to a time where you were really bad at something and you committed and you got good, it just builds that confidence that like, what's the next thing? I interviewed Sheila Johnson, who is the first Black female billionaire in America. A lot of people think it's Oprah. It's not. It's Sheila Johnson, who was the co-founder of BET. Her and her husband founded BET and they sold it. And that's when she became a billionaire. And she was telling me how they got divorced. And so now she wanted to go into a new industry. She's 60 years old and decides to go into the hospitality industry and build a hotel. And it took her 10 years just to clear the land and like basically get this hotel built. They had like every disaster and every challenge happened. So she didn't open the hotel until she was 70 years old. You know what I mean?
Wild.
Isn't that wild? Like, so it's just, I was like, wow, you really can reinvent yourself at any time and you can do anything that you want at any time, So that was really fascinating to me that we have that option.
We do. Now, it probably is easier when you have $1 billion.
It certainly is. It certainly is.
But the point is still very, very valid.
Yes. But like, I don't think most billionaires probably start something brand new and go into a whole new industry at 60 years old. That takes 10 years just to get the doors open,
Yeah. I think there are a million interesting things about that, but it also proves the point of, for a lot of people, when you're a child and you think about retiring on the beach, or this picture of the quote unquote American dream of, retiring and sipping pina coladas on the beach, it's a complete unrealistic expectation that the personality type that it would take to be an entrepreneur would ever even want that in the end of the game.
Yes.
Which is it's not totally misaligned to want a new business at that point.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Exactly. And I think that's really fascinating, especially for those of us like 7-8 figure businesses, 9-figure, when you're thinking about selling, it's like, do I sell? What am I going to do? I feel like there's a lot of people who sell and regret it. Those are the conversations I've had recently where I feel like almost every single one of them regretted selling, and not all. I think there are some happy sellers. But it's interesting. It's like we all work towards an exit. And then when we get close to it, it's kind of like, does it make sense to exit? Or should I just keep running this thing?
Well, let's get to the exit part, but let's talk about it sounds like the first major hurdle after $1 million was just chaos, because you had tried a bunch of things, created a bunch of different products, retreats, courses, coaching. What was a major shift that you made that allowed you to move from 7 up to 8 figures?
Well, I did this really big launch. Took me like 5 months to pull it off. I had like a Facebook ad person, my husband, and myself. That was it. So I did the Game of Thrones Daenerys, like burn it all down with my law practice. At a certain point where I was just tired of the transition, I let everybody, my favorite employee gave me her notice. And once she did that, it sort of gave me the freedom to just release the whole team. And so that's what I decided to do. Like in a 2-week period, I just let everybody go. And it gave me an opportunity to start over. And so I did a big launch with a new program. And And it's funny because I went to mastermind talks like a week after this launch. So I did this big launch I wrote every piece of copy, every email, the whole website, like all the things involved. And it like really burnt me out. And so I wound up and it was very successful. It made let's say it was like a $400,000 approximately launch that I had done. Might have been a little more than that. And so I leave, this launch that's been successful, but now I can't even see straight. I'm so exhausted from just working so hard to pull all of this off by myself. And I go to mastermind talks and talking to friends and things. And they were like, there's a better way, there's got to be a better way than all this bullshit you're doing. And so after doing that, I flew home from that event and just, on a back of a whatever napkin or whatever piece of paper I had, I just mapped out a more streamlined business where I had one main offer, one main purpose, one main ideal client. And I just mapped that out. And then I spent the summer working towards launching that. And I launched it like September, October, and it was Hello 7. And it was a mastermind was like the core product of it. And it was geared towards people who were already at 6 figures who wanted to get to 7 figures. And I just focused on them. And so that was the business up until COVID. That was the business. And it grew to, I think I went from 1 to 2 million during that time period. I started 2020 with a plan to make 2 million again, but make it easier. I'm like, just make another 2 million, but let it be easy. What a hilarious idea when I look back. Because of course, by March, the whole business was falling apart because so many of my clients, they were either in event space and hospitality or their partners had just been let go. Everyone was just scared. So they just started cutting and including, cutting our program. So we lost a lot of clients really short period. So we had to reinvent the entire business in like 30 days or less, So that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the shift then? Because 1 to 2 again, COVID hits. And how did you transform the business at that point?
Yeah. So basically I just took stock, and I think whenever, and this might be relevant for people right now. Whenever you are like, feel like your back is against the wall or a shift is necessary, I think that the first step is just to take stock of like, what do I have? What ingredients do I have? I feel like it's similar to, I grew up low income. And so there were times when there was like no food or not enough food or whatever. And so you had to just like look in the pantry and say like, what's there? Like, what can I make out of whatever's here? And so I feel like it's the same thing, except the business version. It's like, what do you got in your cabinets and how can you mix that together into something that can make you money? And so I looked and I said, okay, I have this team. I had a team of coaches that I had built up and been training. I had a new member site that I had just literally launched like a week or two prior for my mastermind. So at least I had that asset. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with it now, but I had that. I had a podcast with a lot of raving fans. Like it wasn't a huge following, but let's say like 15,000, people listening faithfully every week. And so I'm like, okay, these are the ingredients, we have this brand. What can we do with these ingredients? And so the first thing I did was talk to my audience. I just went to them and said, I think we had like a private Facebook group at the time that was free. And so I just went there and said like, what do you want? What do you need right now? Like, how can we serve you? What kind of help are you looking for? And they answered with everything. They're like, we want marketing. We want coaching advice. We want mindset. We want teach us how to run the operations, teach us how to build a team. It was like everything under the sun. And I'm like, okay, well, this is everything that I do in my mastermind. And the light bulb went off that, okay, what if it's the exact same offer? Mastermind and a membership is basically the same thing. The only difference is the price and how many people are in it, really. And so I decided to turn it into a membership, lower the price. There were some things that were really advanced that I pulled out, but left a lot of my content in there in the member site, and basically took the member site, the coaches and the podcast audience and just turned that into a membership, which is the club, which is still our core offer today. And that one thing, that one shift, thank God that happened. 2020 ended at 5 million. And then 2021, we hit 10 million, and we've been at 8 figures plus since then. So that 2 to 5 and then 5 to 10, those were 2 very painful years because you do not have the team or the process or the operations to handle that. And so we're just like rapidly hiring, rapidly trying to build process, breaking everything constantly. It's like you build something and then it breaks because more people come, right? We launched the club in May of 2020 with 300 founding members, which immediately turned it into $1 million offer because it was $295 a month. And so the following month in June, we had 1,000 more people join. And that's when shit started to break. It was great from an outward facing point of view, but from behind the scenes, we were like running around like nuts, trying to keep up with the growth.
Is there anything that you would have done differently through that growth period?
And honestly, I probably should have hired someone. I don't even know who. But like some kind of advisor, consultant, or something who had like high level operational skills. I just don't think in my network I had that or wasn't aware of it. I did hire someone to help me hire. Like I hired an HR person because we needed so many roles filled rapidly. So we were a pretty young company with an HR department. But yeah, so probably hiring, asking for help more, you know what I mean? Because I think when you have a problem, the instinct is to hide the problem, right? And just rack your brain and try to figure it out on your own. But the sooner, and this is something you learn with entrepreneurial maturity, but the sooner you start making a call as soon as you realize you have a problem instead of just sitting with it in shame, right? Like shame. I heard Tiffany Aliche, who's somebody else you should definitely have on the podcast. She's running a great 8-figure business too. But I heard her say shame shields solutions. And I completely agree. So if you feel shame about a business problem you're having, you're shielding yourself from the solutions, right? As soon as you say it out loud to someone, they're probably going to be like, oh, I know someone who went through that, right? Or whatever. But even if it's just to have a release and vent, right? And realize you're not alone. I think that's so important. So those are some of the things that I might have done differently. But I think you just like those moments, like how can you possibly be prepared for something you've never experienced before, Yeah. Whether working for somebody else or through friendships or whatever, you don't have that network, you're going to learn as you go. And that's just what it is.
Well, I'll add to that narrative, shame shield solutions, which is for all of you motherfuckers out there that don't feel shame, but think that you have the best answer. It's the same cue. Fucking ask somebody else and get help when you're stuck on something. You don't have to ruminate by yourself and come up with it yourself.
Yes.
Somebody has already been there and done that.
Exactly right. For everything. And it's like, whatever you think is like the biggest, most epic problem is somebody else is like, oh, I've solved that 12 times. Like that's nothing, know? That's how it is with my team sometimes now. They'll bring me something and they'll be like up in arms and so stressed. And I'm like, oh, I don't care about that. That's not a big deal. Here's what we do, run this play, and it's not that serious. So yeah. So asking for help sooner, which is what I do now. Now I'm like, who can I call? And then I go send a text. And before you know it, I have a solution before the day is out, and not only a solution, a referral, all of the things.
Yeah.
You're working on that.
I'm still working on that. I catch myself all the time with things that I've been thinking about. One of the best exercises for me is to review old goals or read old journals.
I love doing that too.
And look at what I was thinking 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago. And when I find something in there that is still an unresolved problem, what the fuck have I been doing? Like how do you let something sit for 5 years or 3 or 1 or 10 or a week when it's really important?
That is so interesting. I've literally never had that experience. I did not think that's what you were going to say.
Good for you.
I think really what it is that I've solved that problem on some level, but there's like a new version of it or a new level of it that I'm now facing. Cause I feel like it's like this cyclical pathway where you're like, oh, I know how to do that, but you know how to do it here. but now you have to learn how to do it up here, So I think it's just the levels, but that's funny.
Yep. Well, welcome to my world and my brain. Okay, so tell me about one of the things that has become popular or popularized in the last 10 years in particular is leveraging books to grow business.
Yes.
And there are a ton of people that have used this model and really been good examples, and in some cases even teaching the process. Tell me about how We Should All Be Millionaires came to be and where it fit into the overall business model.
Yeah.
If at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very much a feeler. So I'm kind of feeling my way into things, and I'm kind of following my instincts in a lot of ways. And I think We Shall Be Millionaires was just something I just wanted to get out. Like, it was like I had just had something to say, and I needed to say it. And I also chase efficiency. Like, I love efficiency. And I found with my clients that I was having the same conversation over and over again. And I'm like, I just want to, and the thing is too, is like when I have it one-on-one, it's different. It's gentler. There's a process to help them uncover these limiting beliefs that they have, right? Versus when I write in my newsletter, I'm just yelling. You know what I mean? I can just rant and be 100% honest because it's not directed at an individual, even though I'm thinking of some people while I write it, right? And so that's kind of why I wanted to write the book, is because I'm like, everyone is kind of talking around things or not really dealing with the thing, talking about, let's say the pay gap, right? And that's between women and men, which is a problem. And I completely agree, but we also have agency. And what are we ourselves going to do about it, while we also are fighting for policy change, right? What are we going to do so that we can win now and not wait for policy change that's going to come decades later? So I think that was part of, and I'm like, listen, y'all, we just need to focus on our money. We need to get focused. And we also need to put boundaries in place. We need to stop doing everything for our partners, let them get the fuck off their asses. And they made that child too. Go get that child. That's your child. You're not the fucking babysitter. And so I wanted to go on a rant basically about all of the things that I had seen with my clients that were driving me nuts, and just things that I'm like, it's so obvious to me, and I feel like it's obvious to everyone, but maybe it isn't. And so I just decided to start writing. And I think when you write something like the outline, when I look at the outline for my original book proposal for We Should All Be Millionaires, it is hilarious how different it is than what the end result is going to be, like what the end result was. Because I think when you sit down to write, it's like, what does this book want to be? It's kind of like telling you as you write it. So you start a chapter and you maybe have an idea of where you're starting from. And then the other ideas come to you in the creative process, like what stories you need to tell, what strategies you need to teach, all of those things. So it just became what it wanted to become. And I had no idea it was going to do well. I was just kind of like, I just wanted to write this book. And my plan was I was going to give it to people when they asked me for advice. What should I do about my pricing, right? Like, what should I do about this person in my life that I need to put boundaries up with, or whatever, all of these little things. I wanted to teach them how to change their own thoughts, right? Like I wanted to teach them thought work, all these things that I wanted to have just in a nice, neat book. So I could be like, here, read this. Okay. I'm not getting on a call with you. Here, read that, done. So I think that was kind of the thinking behind it. And I was like, let's just try it and see what happens. And I really did. I hoped it would help the business as well. And I imagined that it would, but not in the way that it did. Like, that's not what I was picturing. So, yeah. So that's.
And how did it help the business?
Well, I wound up hiring a publicist a year before to like help me manage press, and then also to help me with like the book launch, because that's what a friend of mine did when she launched her books. I'm like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. And I actually went viral like the year before it came out on a totally like not something that I wasn't attempting to go viral. I don't know, maybe some people are these days, but I think back then, I don't know how common that was to try to go viral. It was more like it just happened. And I don't even think we understood how, right? Or like what made it go viral. But anyway, because of that, there was a lot of incoming press coming in now. And so that's what made me hire the publicist sooner. And so it just sort of like, when I started to do press and stuff, I did the Drew Barrymore show. And it was all virtual, but like I was sharing the ideas from the book, and she was having her own aha moments in the middle of this interview where she's interviewing me. But it's like she has a moment where she's no longer host and she's just asking me questions for her own self, you know? And I was just like, oh, maybe this is really something that people need to hear. So anyway, it sold very well. And I also thought, as a marketer, right, I'm going to market the hell out of this book. So I did every podcast possible, all the media, blah, blah, blah. The best thing that has sold the book is literally the book itself, right? So all I did was get the engine started. But once people started reading it, they would share it with their friends. They would buy 5 copies for like their clients or their sisters or their moms, and doing book clubs and all of those things. So it continues to sell a lot of copies every week to this day. And it's because people reading it are like, oh, you got to read this, and they're sharing it. So that was something that I did not know could happen or would happen. I just expected brute force everything because that's what I had done to date as an entrepreneur. So yeah, so it basically introduced me to a whole lot more people. And that then introduced Hello 7 to a whole lot more people. So we wound up with a lot more clients too.
And what year did We Should All Be Millionaires come out?
2021, May 2021. So it's funny too, because we had created the club out of necessity in 2020. And I already had the book deal at that point. I was actually I was in the middle of writing the book when the pandemic happened. I had just come back from a writing retreat where I wrote half of the book. So we wound up creating like the perfect sort of offer ladder accidentally, you know what I mean? Where we had the club first, then the book came out, and it was like the perfect next step was to join the membership community.
Okay. So you wrote the book through a period of time where you were at 2 million, going to 2 million again, and trying to make life easier.
Yes.
In what world did you think, hey, you know what I should do? I should make my life easier by writing a book. Because for most people, this is a huge undertaking that is tremendously distracting from operating a business or making things happen. And at the time, it sounds like it's not even that it had a specific business outcome that you were aware of. That was sort of a secondary benefit, possibly. So on some level, that's a question, but really the question is, would you do that again right now, or without that direction, without having an outcome to the book? Would you stop the business that you had going on when you're multi 7-figure or 8 figures and write a book to get it off your chest? Does that still fit into your playbook?
Well, I got like several more book deals after the first book deal. So I've had 3 Audible books come out this year. I have another book coming out in June, and then I have a book coming out the following year. And then I basically have many book deals at this point. So I guess the answer is yes, I would keep writing because I've continued to write. And this year is the first year that the next set of books have started to come out. I got those book deals like 2 years ago, but it was just a process, right? Producing them all. But yes, I think I just follow my instincts, you know, and also, you know, see what opportunities come. And it's like, am I excited about this? Does this make sense? Or even if it doesn't make sense, is it something that I'm hype about, you know? And I just follow that. And I think it has served me, because I think in some ways you're sort of setting the stage for an expansion that you can't even fathom yet. But you're excited enough about this thing to say yes to it, and then it opens doors, or it expands your audience, or it like readies you for whatever the next level is. So I think I'm just tuning in to what my desires are, what my instincts are saying, and following that. Now, is that the most linear path to like the most massive amount of money? I don't know, but I would say it's not that, you know, because it's been pretty good for me, where when I follow my instincts. And in fact, I have found in the last couple of years, like this is probably the biggest lesson of 7 to 8 figures, is every time I don't follow my instincts, I regret it. Right. And it winds up being a problem. So like if I hire now, in the past couple of years, if I've hired a outside consultant and I disagree with something they're telling me to do, and I do it anyway, I always regret it. Or if I hire Like I've hired more senior people who have 20 years of experience that they're bringing to Hello 7, and they advise me to do something and I don't like it, but I do it anyway because I've hired this person and they have all this experience. Always regret it. So what I've learned is I know what I'm doing. And so just go do it. Right. Because while they may have built other things or they may have other expertise, it's like when you know, and you just need to follow that and stop rationalizing it, stop coming up with a logical reason to follow your own gut and your own intuition. Just follow it because it's the shorter pathway. Because how I want to run my company is not necessarily how other corporations have been built for many years, And also too, I know my audience, I know my team, right? Like there's just certain things as a founder. And sometimes we listen to advisors and it don't go where you want it to go. So does that mean advisors have no place? No, of course, there are people on my team that I listen to all the time, but it's not because it's not competing with something that is an intuitive hit that I'm like, no, don't do that. So now I've just really honed in and tried to really tune in and listen to myself and make sure I say it out loud. Because whenever I don't say the thing and I'm like, I'm thinking the thing, but I'm not saying the thing, it always bites me in the ass every time. Have you had that experience?
Well, as a hyper analytical non-feeler, I will say that when I hear people talk about this stuff, I'll tell you my takeaways on this.
I can't wait to hear it.
I think that one universal truth is that there are frequently many, many, many paths to get to an outcome.
Yes.
2, if you do not like what you are doing, if you are not pulled towards the thing that you are doing, it is going to be harder to execute.
Yes.
Period. Doesn't mean you can't, but it's going to be harder to do it if you're running uphill with a headwind.
Yes.
If you can get the wind behind you and run downhill, it's going to be easier to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are both really important things to remember. There's one other, but I get distracted by all the laughter.
Sorry. Well, I also think too, when you're running uphill, it impacts your results. So even if you do execute, what are the results like? And I think that was what was happening in my law practice. Like I was getting results, but not the exponential results I was looking for because I was sort of like, there was just sort of this wet blanket over everything that I was doing, versus when you're hype about it, that excitement, that energy can carry you. And also brings the best ideas when you're thinking about it, you read more about it, you listen to podcasts about it. Like when you become obsessive about an idea, you're excited and hype. That I think that's just naturally going to make it better than when you're doing something that you really don't enjoy and that you'd rather not do, but you're doing it because money or whatever other reason.
Yeah. Well, I know that we're coming up on time here. I've got a million other questions, but let's talk about the structure of your team, because through the chaos, the 2 to 5, 5 to 10, do you have outside of how you feel about it, do you have any sense of systemically when to hire new people? Like what was the thought? Like, how did you grow and how did you stabilize through that process?
Yes. So we started hiring people, and you just have to look at where are the bottlenecks? Where are the bottlenecks in the business, right? What are the things that I need to get off my plate because I'm often the bottleneck with that thing. So first it's execution kind of things like copywriters. We need a team of copywriters, more than one, because I don't have time to write anymore, anything. Barely have time to review and edit. So let's get these copywriters in and get them trained. So that was crucial. My systems team, right? Because I am not a tech person, never have been. So I have a great systems director and had a previous, systems director before him who held it all together, made sure everything was talking to each other and working how it needed to work and all of that. So the systems team was always crucial as well. And a lot of times my strategy was I'd have amazing contractors that have been with me for a long time. And this is where I use my negotiation skills to convince them to come work for me. Because a lot of times they were freelancers or entrepreneurs on their own with a couple clients. And I'm like, how much are you making from those clients? Add it up. Right. And then I would just offer them a salary where I'm giving them their full salary. They can still take clients on the side if that's something they want to do outside of working hours, of course, but also, benefits and all of that. And then also, I'm growing this thing exponentially. So if you're here, if we ever sell or whatever, who knows, I might give out equity at some point in the future. So like you get to be a part of this thing that we're building together and grow with me, you know? So that's how I got the president of my company, the systems director, and then his predecessor, who came after him. Who else? It was like somebody to run the marketing department because I couldn't stay on top of all of that. Somebody to run programs because I couldn't stay on top of all of that. Those are probably the first things that I needed a department head for. Then an operations director to make sure like we're building process this whole way, managing team and all of that. So those are sort of the areas where I sort of start with a vision of like, where am I going? What is the dream team that I eventually want that I can't afford today? And how can I start building that out now? What's the basic bitch cheaper version of that those folks can then grow into some of those roles, you know? And thinking in terms of departments has helped as well, which also sometimes can be a detriment, to be honest. But I think that that's kind of how I organize it. But I always have a wish list of like, who are my next hires? Because there's, if you're looking to grow, this is how you grow. You grow with team, right? And building team and putting people on projects that they can just run with that you cannot. That's a side project for you. But if you hand it to them, they can be full-time focused on it and really execute. So that's been the process. And of course, we also have some agencies that we work with that like things that we outsource that, I think when you scale and grow, you wind up outgrowing all of these agencies that you've hired and been with for 5 years. You got to fire everybody and get new ones because they no longer can handle, like you're their biggest client now. And they can't see the future with you, right? They don't have a vision for their piece of it. So we've done a lot of that along the way as well. So I think that's the journey.
That's a great note. One of the things that I've heard you say is start speaking to yourself like a millionaire. Mm-hmm. And that's through the lens of Hello 7, right? That's through the lens of getting the entrepreneur up to 7 figures.
Yes.
Where you are now, how do you talk to yourself? What does speaking to yourself now sound like?
Yes. Oh, this is such a good question. It's funny. A friend of mine who also should be on the podcast, I'll make a list for you.
Please.
She also has an 8-figure business. And she said to me, she was like, you have to start acting like a billionaire. That's what she said to me. She's like, you have to start acting like that now. And so once she said it, it was like ringing in my ears repeatedly. And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't even know what billionaires act like, truth be told. Right. But you can get clues, right? And you can ask yourself, is this something that I think Beyonce is doing or Jay-Z or Jeff Bezos or whoever? Like, is this something they would do? Right. Or put their attention on or whatever. So it does sort of train you to start elevating your thinking in that way. So that's something that I think about a lot. And I think about like, I feel like Hello 7 is one of many businesses. And, I'm starting to think about that, like mergers and acquisitions to grow instead of just hiring team or doing everything homegrown, because that's the long way, right? That took a lot of time to build that up in this way. So I'm like, okay, how can I acquire other businesses that can accomplish the goal? So instead of hiring one person, I basically buy a department through an acquisition instead. So that's where my brain is going now. And in terms of how I think of myself, I think I try to keep the end goal in mind, and I have to keep revisiting it. What is my vision now? Because it changes, right? Like you feel like you're on a certain pathway or you accomplish it and then you're like the road runner. Now what? What's next? But my goal is to build this into at least $100 million business. That's the next goal. And then once I get there, we'll find out what's next after that, So that's what I think about. Like, okay, is this version of me in the future, this 9-figure business owner or this billionaire version of me, what would she be prioritizing? Right? What decisions would she make? Would she talk to herself like this? Right? Would she allow herself to sit and feel defeated for a whole day? Or does she get 20 minutes and then she got to pick her ass up and go get back to it? So I think that's how I do it. But the other thing that I do, so it's not just my own thoughts, is I'm always listening to podcasts, audiobooks. I always got something in my ears so that I have something positive, something propelling me forward, hearing stories from other people who've done what I'm trying to do already, right? For them, it's easy. They could do it again. 9-figure business, do that for lunch, Whereas I want to hear that so that it doesn't feel insurmountable, I think that's a very important piece of it.
Love that. Rachel Rodgers, I appreciate you carving out time today. Like I said, I've got a million other questions, and I'd love to get more time in general. But in the meantime, where should people go to find out more about you?
Well, you can find Hello7 at hello7.co, or follow me on Instagram, Rachel Rodgers, ESQ. And check out my new book. It's called $1 Million Action. Share it with your clients.
I love it. We will link to it in the show notes. And until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed doing it. I need your help. There are 3 places you can find Beyond a Million: the podcast itself, beyondamillion.com, which has some cool free resources, including a free course. And we finally launched the Beyond a Million YouTube channel. I would love it if you would go there and subscribe. And if you don't want to, you still would probably enjoy seeing the visual content. Check it out, youtube.com/@Beyond a Million.